Today we're going to be comparing two cameras, Nikon's Z50, which was launched in October 2019, and Nikon Z50II, which was launched in November 2024. Both of these cameras share a lot of similarities, being both based on the same 20 megapixel sensor. However, there are some stark differences between the two, which we're going to be exploring in this video, which will hopefully help you make an informed purchase decision or decide whether you want to upgrade from the Z50 to Z52, or indeed just dip your toe into mirrorless cameras. The Z50 is a very capable camera. I want to start out and say it is a very good camera, though perhaps it's starting to show its age slightly. It is a smaller, more compact package than the Z50II. So if you're used to the Nikon Z50 and you really like its size, then I hate to say it, but you might be a bit disappointed by the Z52 because this is 70 grams lighter. It is also less tall, less wide, and less thick. It is a smaller camera overall than Nikon's Z52. Now, in day-to-day use, I don't find that much of an issue. However, I'm also used to lugging around a Nikon Z8, which is significantly bigger and heavier, so your mileage may vary. But it is important to think about the actual physical size. Obviously, the other big difference between the two is price. Nikon Z50 is no longer really available brand new from what I can tell, which is understandable. I think there are still some deals to be had at the start of this year, but I haven't seen many brand new ones available. As such, you're probably going to be limited to the second-hand market, which is no bad thing because there are deals to be had. If you were to buy from a second-hand retailer in the UK, perhaps Quirks or MBP online, you're going to be expecting to pay between £350 and £450 depending on the condition. On eBay, that price is much closer to £350 currently as of July 2025. So price-wise, it is a steal versus its new price of £850. £850 is the same price that the Nikon Z52 launched at, and currently on Amazon I think I saw it for about £770, so a bit of a saving on its new price. There are some deals to already be had, and second-hand I haven't seen many of these. I'd probably expect to pay around £700 if I was buying it second-hand. So right off the bat, we have some key differences in terms of size and weight, which might influence your decision right out the bat. Now, if you say, I don't mind the size of the Z50 and perhaps the features we go through in the future, you say, I don't really care about, you might say, but I don't like this small grip. Well, one of the things I basically kept on my Z50 the entire time and every single time I use it is one of these small rig base plates. Just gives you an extra ½ centimeter or so on the bottom of the camera, makes the grip a little bit more comfortable. I really liked using it. I did keep it on there pretty much all the time, every time I take it out, though I still use one on my Z52 as well. But yeah, that's another way to make the grip a bit bigger if that's what you want to do. So that might not be a consideration, but the weight will be an issue for some people, so bear that in mind. Physically as well, other than the size, there is another key difference. That is the screen type. So it's an ever so slightly larger screen, 3.2 versus 3 inches, though the same resolution and same brightness on the back of these cameras. Though you might already notice the Z50 has a flip tilt screen, so you can flip it out and tilt it. You can even have its own little selfie mode like this, which was a great idea, but is terrible if you have your camera mounted on a tripod, which you probably do if you're taking those kind of images. So that's a shame, but it is actually my preferred style. I really like the tilt flip style screens. The Z52 has a fully articulating screen. This means, again, your selfie mode now is on the side, which makes a bit more sense, though even here the wires are in the way. It allows you to articulate it downwards, upwards. You can probably find the right angle with the Z50II screen, whereas you might be more limited because you can't flip it outwards on the original Z50. So Z52 does have a more versatile screen. Despite this, I do actually prefer the tilting mechanism of the original Z50 versus the Z52. I hope I got them right there, but basically Z52 fully articulating, original Z50 just tilt flip. Right. It's also worth considering that these actually have different control structures in terms of the buttons and layout is actually different on the Z52 versus the original Z50. Now, the Z52 has very much been brought in line with cameras like Nikon Z8 and that ilk, which is a good thing. It does, however, mean that if you're going from the Z50 to Z52, you're going to be pressing the wrong buttons the entire time. I'm very sorry. The back of the cameras are basically a very different layout. Now, what that means in practice is the Z50 actually had some touch buttons on the side of the touch screen on the back. So you'd have the display and the magnifying buttons as sort of virtual buttons on the touch screen. You do not have those on the Z52. They've decided to make use of that as an entire display. So you have the magnifying buttons on the side, to the side of it. You also have the display button as a separate button as the top, and you have the delete button in the top left and the drive mode selection in the top left as well. All these things are more common to people who will be using the Z8, and I think even the Z6II and Z6III, definitely the Z6III, have adopted those structures as well. It does make more sense. It's definitely what Nikon's sticking with going forward, but it is obviously different to what the Z50 was. I do prefer the controls on the Z52. Top of the camera is much more familiar. They're slightly different laid out, but they're still very similar. The only difference here is a picture control button, which allows you to change the actual picture styles that Nikon provides, and you can also download extra ones from the Nikon Imaging Cloud, but that is the main difference on the top of the camera, so not as many changes there. And they both also have the same two custom buttons to the side of the lens mount, which is useful. You can map them to whatever you want, and they are slightly larger, I think, and slightly further apart on the Z52, which makes them slightly better. One more similarity I do want to call out, because for some reason this is the only camera in Nikon's entire Z-mount lens lineup, Z-mount camera lineup that has it. They both have built-in flashes. It is the same flash. It is really handy to have it. I don't understand why we're not allowed internal flashes on any of Nikon's other mirrorless cameras. I really liked in the DSLRs, the higher end stuff, when they had the built-in flash, sort of mid-range stuff, I guess you'd call it, having like the flash commander mode built in. It would make so much sense to have that on some of the other Nikon cameras. But I guess given the fact they don't really produce flashes anymore, they don't really care. But yeah, sorry, just a slight gripe of mine that I was going to bring up there. Right, now let's talk about the main event, which is obviously the cameras themselves and how they perform and function. The Nikon Z50 has the X-Speed 6 image processor. It's what the Nikon Z6 and Z7 launched with. Now, that processor is fine, and it does give you things like face detection and subject detection, but the Z52 has Nikon's X-Speed 7 image processor, the same as the Z9 and the Z8, which means its autofocus and image detection and subject detection is significantly better in every single way over the Z50. It is a big deal. It even means that I think the image processing that's done at higher ISOs in the Z52 is better than the Z50. All of this made possible with the X-Speed 7 image processor. So, what does that mean for you? Depending on what you shoot, you could have a better success rate using autofocus with the Z52 over the Z50. So if you shoot sports of any kind, motorsports or actual sports, you're gonna find the Z52 a better choice if you use autofocus. If you shoot nature or wildlife photography, it's highly likely you're gonna find the Z52 a better camera than the Z50. Now, if you're shooting portraits, street photography, still life, subjects that move slightly less, you're not going to see as much of a difference. This isn't to say that the Z52 probably isn't better in those areas, it just means you're going to notice it less. So, the Z50 is less good at autofocus than the Z52. Personally, I was able to get many wonderful photographs with the Z50. While I was using it, on a regular basis, I never complained about the autofocus being a huge issue for me. When taking stills, we'll get to video. This is very much talking about stills. With the Z50II though, I grab this camera over my Z8 quite often. It is that good, okay? Yes, it is not full frame. Yes, it doesn't have 40 whatever megapixels. There are some key differences between those two cameras, and there are many situations where I will pick the Z8 over the Z50II. But if I am just going out and about for myself, taking some photos, I love this camera. I love the size of it. I love the weight of it. The autofocus is pretty much as good as my Z8. It is fantastic. For that reason alone, I truly love the Z52. But the Z50 is perfectly capable of taking great photos. My partner has taken so many great photographs of the Z50 that it's clear to me that it's just a case of making your life slightly easier, not a case of you can't get good images. When we're talking about video, I do think that's a different story. Now, not only do you have that difference in actual shoot time, so the Z50 and Z52, you know, the Z52 will basically do limitless amounts of video until you run out of storage, whereas the Z50 will stop after 30 minutes. That is an annoyance if you're shooting longer form content. But when it comes to autofocus in video, it is much better on the Z52. There's much less losing the subject, you know, focusing on the wrong parts. Just for that alone, I would say it's a lot better. If you shoot a lot of video content, definitely get the Z52 over the Z50. It is a huge upgrade and you will notice it. Not only that, but if we talk about video for a little bit, the Z52 also can shoot H.265 in N-Log, which in 10-bit, which essentially is not quite, you know, raw video, but it's getting that way. It's a lot higher quality, gives you a lot more flexibility. You can shoot Nikon N-Log, right? In camera, onto your memory card, no external recorder. It's very good. In 4K, which is just fantastic. 4K 30 in both of these cameras, uncropped, which is great. However, in the Z52, you can also shoot 4K 60 with a crop, but the 4K is also oversampled, so it's higher quality than the, I think oversampled from 5.6K, so it's higher quality than the Z50 can do. The video, there really is a huge difference in ability in these two cameras when it comes to video, and I would not hesitate to say that the Z52 is a very, very capable video camera. I've shot many of my videos on it. I've shot client work on the Z52. I really enjoy using it. I would not use the Z50 for that same purpose. I have shot some videos for the channel on the Z50. I have never been terribly happy with the results. It is much less capable in terms of video use. So straight off the bat, if you do a lot of video, please don't get a Z50, get the Z52. Your money will go further and it will be better as a result, because you're just, in terms of, you're not going to have to upgrade as soon. If you buy a Z50, you're going to probably find yourself hankering after a Z52 pretty quickly if you do video work. Also, the Z52 having that headphone jack is super useful as well, because it means you can actually monitor your audio, which for some reason Nikon decided you couldn't do on the Z50. Perhaps they knew that that video wasn't going to be the focus, and that's why they didn't do it, but it is a major, major difference. In stills, we've already talked about autofocus. There are also some other differences. Not only is the Z52 more capable in autofocus, it is also more capable in terms of frames per second. Now, both of them do 11 frames per second. That's what the specs say, right? However, once we get to the extended frame modes, you can shoot up to 30 frames per second, albeit in JPEG, with pre-capture in the Z52, whereas the Z50, it's slightly higher. I think it's 14 frames per second, but that's it, okay? You kind of get limited pretty quickly. Z52, 30 frames per second. Pre-capture, also only available with JPEG, where essentially you're able to save up to a second's worth of the shots before you hit the shutter button. It is a super cool feature if you're shooting nature photography, where, you know, something moves, you hit the shutter, and that reaction time of, you know, 200th, 300th of a second means you missed the shot that you wanted. It allows you to actually save the shots that were in the buffer up until that point. Amazing feature, super useful. Use it in my Z8 all the time. Also use it in the Z52. The Picture controls, there's a few more of them on the Z52, as I mentioned when we were talking about buttons. There's a sort of the effects, they only really count in JPEG. If you like to edit in camera or just like get the finished product straight away in camera, it can be useful. I prefer to shoot RAW a lot of the time. Well, RAW and JPEG gives me some flexibility, but it is nice to have those additional recipes that you can add to the camera. I haven't really done it, to be honest with you. I've never really felt the need, but they are there. Do sometimes use the picture controls. Sometimes it's fun just to add the color on if you know you're just going to transfer the images to your phone and use them. But yeah, in terms of that, that's definitely something to keep in mind, that you have those extra ones in the Z52. There are, of course, a plethora of other features when you're shooting with these cameras that are different. I do not feel that in a quick overview video that we're trying to do here, that's necessarily worth going into. I do think it's worth mentioning that the electronic viewfinder, although they're both the same resolution and style, this is twice as bright as the Z50s. So in bright situations, the Z52 does have a bit of an advantage over the Z50, as the EVF is easier to see. Also, this is a really random one, but whilst we talk about the EVF, the Z52 has a removable viewfinder rubber mount that goes around it, which is okay. It means you can replace it, but the one on Z52 is permanent, but it means it doesn't get lost. I have bought so many of these damn viewfinder things, so they just come off by accident and then you lose them. So they just made the one on the Z52 permanent, and you know what? I'm not mad about it. It might annoy some people that you can't replace it, but for me, I actually think it's a good move. It makes life easier, so that's something to think about too. Both of them allow you to actually output the video from the camera, albeit at a lower quality than 10-bit on the Z52, through the HDMI micro port, or micro HDMI rather. It's fine, it's an acceptable port. You know, that's one of those things. They both charge via USB. However, this being an older camera, the Z50 only has micro USB, whereas the Z52 uses USB-C. Clearly, USB-C is much better than micro USB. So, I mean, there's no real comparison there. Also, faster USB ports as well. The micro USB on the Z50 is USB 2, whereas the USB-C port on the Z52 is USB 3. That is much faster for transferring images across. Given we're talking about images, both of them use SD cards, single SD card slot. The Z50 is UHS 1 and the Z52 is UHS 2. Now, that means you can use faster memory cards in the Z52. Perhaps that's what makes things like the pre-capture mode slightly more possible. I would argue the main benefit there is when you're transferring images from the Z52 to your computer or other device, it's much quicker if you use a faster memory card. Obviously, they're backwards compatible with memory cards, so if you whack a UHS 2 card, it will work in the Z50, it just won't be as fast. But in the Z52, you just get a bit more flexibility there, which is nice, and it can make full use of those cards as well. I have to say, I would assume that you'd have to find quite a bad SD card for them not to work properly. So I've even used my sort of more standard non-UHS 2 cards in this to shoot 10-bit video, and they've worked. So you probably have to go out of your way to find quite an old SD card to run into any issues with this camera. But if you have an old enough card, I assume you will run into issues because it won't be fast enough to keep up with either 30 frames per second or indeed the video quality and therefore the amount of data. So do keep that in mind. You might need new cards. I will say in the Z50II, I tend to use fairly high-end cards. Yeah, this is a pro-grade gold V60. I guess this is UHS 3 actually. UHS 3 card. Very fast, it works great in all my cameras, and if you just want a reliable memory card, they're worth considering. Loads of other brands vary. I bought that. It's just something to keep in mind. So, which one should you choose? Well, as I mentioned in this when we were going through things, if you shoot a lot of video, get a Z52. It's better in every single way, and it will make a difference to your day-to-day usage. If you shoot stills, but you do a lot of action or nature photography, the Z52 is probably better, but it's not a must. The Z50 is also rather capable. And if you want to save money, there's nothing wrong with buying a £350 Z50. Used gear is a much easier way to get into photography. I am a huge proponent of it, and I do love the Z50. It's just that for my usage, the Z52 does make more sense. There's nothing wrong with the Z50 as such. It's just you're going to get more capability out of the Z52. So if you just shoot standard photography, you want a nice holiday for taking travel snaps, for holidays, for family stuff, the Z50 is a great little camera and you will enjoy using it. It's just if you're looking to step up and be a bit more serious about photography, you might find you'll get more out of the Z52, but by no means is there anything wrong with a Z50. £850 for a Z52 brand new, assuming it's full price, is a lot of money. By the time you add a lens like the 16-50, which is an entry-level lens, you're starting to look at, you know, £1,000 plus. Adds up really, really fast. And I'd say the two lens combination of the 16-50 and 50 to 250mm is a great kit, so that's worth considering. I love both those lenses, but you know, you might quickly say, oh, I'd love like a prime lens, and then you're suddenly looking at £500 for a prime, at which point, if you'd save the money, maybe the Z50 would just make that a little bit more affordable. So to me, the Z52 is a no-brainer in a lot of situations, but the Z50 was a camera I was happy with for so long that I would still struggle not to recommend it. So depending on the type of photography you do, you might still find you can get a lot out of the original Z50, so don't write it off immediately and don't feel that you have to upgrade. But if any of those differences resonated with you, you might be able to benefit from the Z52, so it might be worth considering. I also expect that we'll see some upgrades to like the Z30 in the near future, hopefully a Z32, and maybe even a ZFC Mark II or a ZFC2. So, you know, those cameras might be ones you prefer, and that's something to look out for. If you did a lot of video, a Z32 could make a lot of sense if they take a lot of the internals from Z52 and pop them in the Z30 body. So keep an eye out for that, I guess. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, give this video a like and leave a comment below, especially if you're considering these. Why did you make the choice you made? If you have any questions about both cameras, equally pop those in the comments and I'll be happy to help too. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. It really does help me out and I really do appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching and I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye.